The phone call came at exactly 12:57 p.m. on a Tuesday, cutting through Dominic, the Shield, Moretti's lunch meeting like a knife through silk. He never answered unknown numbers. In his line of work, unknown meant dangerous, unpredictable, potentially fatal. But something about the persistence of this caller made his instincts flare. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. His associates watched him across the table at Salvatore's, Chicago's most exclusive Italian restaurant where deals were made and destinies were decided over perfectly aged wine and handmade pasta. Dominic's finger hovered over the decline button. Then he answered. "Please, please, please pick up." The voice was small, trembling, desperate. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, crying so hard she could barely speak. They said they're going to hurt my mommy. Please, mister. The nice policeman gave me this number. He said if I was ever scared, really, really scared, I should call the Shield. Are you the Shield? Dominic's blood turned to ice, then to fire. His jaw clenched so hard his molars ached. Around the table, his men noticed the change immediately, the way his eyes went from casual business mode to lethal focus in a heartbeat. "What's your name, sweetheart?" His voice, usually commanding and cold, softened into something gentler, something protective. "Emma," she whispered. "Emma Rodriguez. My mommy is Sarah. She owns the bakery on 10th Street. The one with the angel on the sign. Bad men came. They're saying mommy owes them money, but she doesn't. She doesn't owe anybody anything. She works so hard, mister. She's always working." Dominic knew the bakery. He knew every business in his territory. Sarah's Sweet Angels, a small, struggling operation run by a widow trying to raise her daughter alone. He'd seen her a few times, always exhausted, always pushing through with quiet determination that reminded him of his own mother. "Emma, where are you right now?" Dominic was already standing, already moving toward the door. His men rose with him, reading his body language like the trained soldiers they were. "In the bathroom. Mommy told me to lock the door and call this number. She said the Shield protects people. She said you're a good man even though other people don't always understand." Emma's voice broke. "But I can hear them yelling at her. They're saying bad words. They sound so angry. Please, please help my mommy." In that moment, Dominic Moretti, feared enforcer, respected boss, the man they called the Shield because he protected his territory with absolute ruthlessness, felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Pure, unfiltered rage mixed with protective instinct so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. "Listen to me very carefully, Emma," Dominic said, his voice steel-wrapped in velvet. "I'm 8 minutes away. You stay in that bathroom. You lock that door. You don't come out for anyone except me or your mommy. Understand? How will I know it's safe? Because when I arrive, everything will go very, very quiet. And then you'll hear me knock 3 times slowly, and I'll say, 'Emma, the Shield is here. Your mommy is safe.' Can you remember that?" 3 knocks, Emma repeated. "And you'll say my mommy is safe. That's my promise to you. And I always keep my promises." But what happened next, what Dominic discovered when he arrived at that bakery, would change everything he thought he knew about protection, about family, and about the thin line between violence and love. 6 months earlier, Dominic Moretti hadn't started out as the Shield. That name came later, earned through blood and loyalty and a reputation for protecting the innocent while destroying those who preyed on weakness. But 6 months ago, he was just another enforcer in the Chicago underworld, trying to build something different, something better than the violence that had defined his father's generation. His father, Antonio Moretti, had ruled through fear. Dominic wanted to rule through respect. It was a subtle difference that made all the difference in the world. He'd grown up watching his father destroy lives, break families, and leave a trail of collateral damage that haunted Dominic's dreams. When Antonio died, shot down by rivals in front of their home while 13-year-old Dominic watched, the young man made himself a promise: if he ever had power, he'd use it differently. Now, at 34, Dominic controlled the South Side. But unlike his father, he enforced rules that protected civilians. No drugs near schools. No violence against women or children. No extortion of legitimate small businesses trying to survive. The businesses in his territory paid protection money, yes, but they actually received protection in return. Real protection. The kind that meant they could sleep at night knowing their stores wouldn't be robbed, their families wouldn't be threatened. It made him different. It made him dangerous to the old guard. And it made him beloved by the people who lived in his shadow. Sarah Rodriguez's bakery fell into his territory 6 months ago when the boundaries were redrawn after a territorial dispute. Dominic had noticed her immediately, not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she reminded him of his mother. That same quiet strength. That same determination to build something good despite the darkness surrounding her. He'd made sure his men understood, the bakery was off limits. No collections, no pressure, no problems. Sarah Rodriguez had enough to deal with. He had no idea that decision would lead to this moment, a little girl's terrified phone call and a promise he would die to keep. The call, 12:57 p.m. Marco, Dominic barked at his second-in-command as they sprinted toward his armored Mercedes. Who's on 10th Street? Should be Paulie and Vince doing rounds, Marco replied, already on his phone. But they're not answering. That was wrong. His men always answered. Always. Try them again. Now. Dominic's voice carried an edge that made grown men nervous. And get me intel on Sarah Rodriguez. Everything. Who she owes, who's been watching her, who had the balls to move on a protected business. The Mercedes tore through Chicago's streets like a bullet, weaving through traffic with the practiced efficiency of a driver who'd done this 1,000 times. Dominic kept Emma on the line, his voice calm and reassuring even as his mind calculated possibilities, threats, responses. Emma, sweetheart, you still with me? Yes, she whispered. I'm scared. They're getting louder. I know, baby. I know. But you're being so brave. Your mommy is proud of you. Through the phone, Dominic heard muffled voices, then a woman's cry of pain. Sarah. Every muscle in his body tensed with the need to move, to act, to destroy whoever was causing that sound. Boss, Marco said, his face grim as he checked his phone. Just got word. It's the Kozlov crew. Russian muscle. They've been making moves on small businesses, trying to establish territory. Word is they didn't know the bakery was protected. Dominic's eyes went cold. The Kozlov organization, new to Chicago, aggressive, and too stupid to respect established boundaries. They operated on old-world principles, intimidation, violence, and zero tolerance for resistance. How many? Reports say 3 inside, maybe 2 in a car outside. Call Vincent. Tell him to bring 12 men to 10th Street. Silent approach. Nobody moves until I give the signal. Boss, you're going in alone. Dominic's smile was predatory. I made a promise to a little girl. I'm keeping it. The bakery appeared ahead, its cheerful angel sign a stark contrast to the darkness inside. Dominic could see 2 men leaning against a black sedan, smoking cigarettes and scanning the street with the casual alertness of experienced muscle. Emma, Dominic said softly. I'm here. Stay quiet now, baby. Stay hidden. I'm going to fix this. He ended the call and stepped out of the Mercedes. The transformation was immediate and terrifying. Dominic Moretti, the man who occasionally smiled at children and remembered his mother's kindness, disappeared. In his place stood the Shield, 34 years of controlled violence wrapped in an Italian suit, moving with the quiet confidence of a predator who'd never lost a fight that mattered. The two men outside noticed him immediately. Their hands moved toward concealed weapons, but Dominic's voice stopped them. "Gentlemen." His tone was conversational, almost friendly. "I believe you're conducting business in my territory without permission. That's unfortunate." The larger one, a scar-faced man with cold eyes, sneered. "This is Kozlov business now, paisano. Take your Italian ass somewhere else." "I'm afraid I can't do that." Dominic moved closer, his movements unhurried. "See, the woman you're threatening? She's under my protection. Has been for 6 months. Which means you just made a very, very expensive mistake. There are 3 of our guys inside with her," Scarface said. "And 2 of us out here. You're alone, old man. Math doesn't work in your favor." Dominic smiled, and several people on the street instinctively crossed to the other side. They recognized that smile. They knew what it meant. "I'm 34. Not that old." His hand moved faster than thought, faster than fear, faster than the 2 Russians could process. The first man went down with a crushed windpipe before he could draw his weapon. The second managed to pull his gun, but Dominic's elbow caught him in the temple with surgical precision. Both were unconscious before they hit the pavement. Dominic straightened his jacket and walked toward the bakery door. Inside, he could hear voices arguing in Russian and heavily accented English. Through the window, he saw Sarah Rodriguez backed against the wall, her face pale but defiant. 3 men surrounded her, one holding her arm, the other 2 gesturing aggressively. "Last chance," one of them was saying. 10,000 by Friday, or we take this nice bakery. Maybe we take you too, yes. You're pretty woman. Can work off debt in other ways." The threat hung in the air like poison. Sarah's eyes flashed with rage and fear combined, the look of a mother who'd fight to the death before letting anyone hurt her daughter. "I don't owe you anything," she said, her voice shaking but strong. "I don't know who you are or what you think you're doing, but you need to leave. Now." The man holding her arm laughed. "Or what? You call police. We own police. You call." The door opened with a soft chime. Every head turned. Dominic stood in the doorway, backlit by afternoon sun, looking like vengeance incarnate. His suit was perfect, his expression calm, but his eyes promised death to anyone who didn't make the right choice in the next 10 seconds. "Gentlemen," he said quietly. "I'm going to give you one opportunity to walk out of here alive. You have 5 seconds to start moving." The man holding Sarah laughed. "You? Alone? We have 3 seconds." The Russians looked at each other, confused by his confidence. They were experienced thugs. They'd faced down many men. They outnumbered him 3 to 1. But they'd never faced the Shield. 2 seconds. One of them went for his gun. That was the moment everything became inevitable. Dominic moved like controlled lightning. The first Russian's arm bent backward with a sickening crack before his weapon cleared leather. The second one managed to raise his gun, but Dominic's kick sent it flying while his follow-up strike left the man gasping on the floor, ribs shattered. The third man, the one who'd been holding Sarah, released her and backed away, hands rising in surrender. "Wait, wait. We didn't know, you didn't know she was protected?" Dominic's voice was soft, dangerous. "You didn't think to ask whose territory you were invading? You didn't consider that a woman running a legitimate business in my part of Chicago might have someone watching over her?" Sarah had pressed herself against the wall, her hands trembling but her eyes sharp, alert, taking in every detail of her unlikely savior. "Your friends outside are unconscious, Dominic continued, moving closer to the last standing Russian. These two won't be walking right for months. You have one job now, go back to Viktor Kozlov and tell him that Dominic Moretti says South Side is closed to Russian expansion. Every business here is protected. Every family here is under my shield. He wants war, he'll get war. But if he's smart, he'll realize Chicago's big enough for both of us, just not in the same neighborhood. Kozlov won't, the man started. Kozlov will listen, or Kozlov will die. Those are his only options. Dominic's voice carried absolute certainty. Now get out. Take your trash with you. And don't ever come back to this bakery. The Russian stumbled toward his injured companions, helping them limp toward the door. Dominic watched them go, his body still coiled and ready for violence, before turning to Sarah. She stared at him, her chest heaving, her dark eyes wide with shock and something else, recognition. You, she whispered. You're the shield. Dominic Moretti. Yes. Emma called you. Yes. Sarah's composure finally cracked. Her legs gave out, and Dominic caught her before she could fall, lowering her gently into one of the bakery's chairs. She buried her face in her hands, her whole body shaking with aftershock. Emma, she gasped. Where's Emma? Bathroom. Safe. Locked in, exactly like you told her. Dominic crouched beside her chair, his voice gentling again. She's fine, Sarah. She was brave. She called me. She saved both of you. I thought they were going to. Sarah couldn't finish the sentence. They weren't going to do anything. Dominic's jaw tightened. Not in my territory. Not to you. Before Sarah could respond, a small voice called from the back. Mommy? Mommy, are you okay? Emma, baby, yes. It's safe now. You can come out. The bathroom door opened slowly, and a tiny girl with dark curls and enormous brown eyes peeked out. She saw her mother first, then her gaze traveled to Dominic, who was still crouching beside Sarah's chair. You're the shield, Emma said with absolute certainty. You came. You promised you would come, and you did. Something in Dominic's chest, something he thought had died when he was 13 years old watching his father bleed out, suddenly ached with fierce protectiveness. I keep my promises, he said softly. Always. Emma walked toward him with the fearlessness of children who instinctively recognize safe people. She stopped right in front of him, studying his face with serious concentration. Thank you for saving my mommy, she said solemnly. Then she did something that shocked everyone in the room, including Dominic himself. She hugged him. Small arms wrapped around his neck. A tiny body pressed against his chest in absolute trust. And Dominic Moretti, feared enforcer, respected boss, the man who'd killed more people than he could count, froze completely, unsure what to do with this gift of innocent affection. His hands came up slowly, awkwardly, to rest on Emma's small back. He looked at Sarah over her daughter's shoulder and saw tears streaming down the woman's face. Thank you, Sarah whispered. Thank you for protecting her. For protecting us. But what Dominic didn't say, what he couldn't say in that moment, was that they'd just changed his life as profoundly as he'd changed theirs. Because for the first time in 21 years, Dominic Moretti felt something other than duty, something other than the cold satisfaction of justice served. He felt needed. Not as the shield. Not as the boss. But as a man. And that changed everything. The aftermath word spread through Chicago's underworld with the speed of wildfire. The shield had protected a civilian business with extreme prejudice. 5 Russian enforcers hospitalized. Viktor Kozlov's expansion plans halted. And all of it for a bakery and the woman who ran it. Some called it weakness, protecting a woman for free, with no benefit to his organization. Others called it genius, demonstrating that his protection meant something real, that businesses in his territory were genuinely safe. But Dominic didn't care what anyone called it. He'd made a promise to a little girl, and he'd kept it. That was enough. Except it wasn't enough. Not anymore. Over the following weeks, Dominic found himself driving past Sarah's sweet angels more often than necessary. Checking in with his men about security. Making sure no other crews tried their luck. Ensuring Sarah could rebuild her business without fear. He told himself it was good business. Smart protection. Nothing personal. He was lying. The truth revealed itself 3 weeks after the incident when he walked into the bakery at closing time to discuss security protocols. Sarah was behind the counter, frosting cupcakes with practiced efficiency, while Emma did homework at a corner table. "Mr. Shield." Emma called out, waving enthusiastically. She'd started calling him that despite his gentle corrections. "Did you come to try Mommy's cookies? She made chocolate chip today. They're the best in the whole world." Dominic smiled, a real smile, the kind his men rarely saw. "Is that so?" "Emma, let Mr. Moretti conduct his business," Sarah said, but her tone was warm, affectionate. "Actually," Dominic said, "I wouldn't mind trying those cookies. If it's not too much trouble." Sarah's hand stilled on the cupcake she was frosting. She looked up at him, and Dominic saw something in her eyes that made his breath catch. Not fear. Not gratitude. Something else entirely. "No trouble at all," she said softly. As Emma bounded toward them with a plate of cookies, chattering about her day at school, Dominic realized he was in dangerous territory. Not the kind of danger he'd trained for his entire life. The kind that came from opening doors he'd kept locked for decades. Sarah poured coffee and sat across from him while Emma returned to her homework. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, two people from completely different worlds trying to figure out if those worlds could somehow intersect. "Why did you really come today?" Sarah asked quietly. "The security is fine. Your men check every night. You know we're safe." Dominic set down his coffee cup. Honesty, he'd learned, was both a weapon and a shield. "Because I wanted to make sure you were okay. Really okay. Not just safe, but recovering. From the Russians? From everything." Dominic's voice was gentle. "Running a business alone, raising Emma, dealing with the aftermath of trauma. That's a lot for anyone." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "I'm managing. I always manage. You shouldn't have to just manage." The words came out more intensely than Dominic intended. "You should have help. Support. Someone who," he stopped himself. "Someone who what?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Someone who makes sure you're not carrying everything alone." The air between them crackled with possibility, with the tentative hope of two damaged people recognizing something precious in each other. "Mommy," Emma's voice interrupted. "Can Mr. Shield stay for dinner? Please." Sarah looked at Dominic, a question in her eyes. He should say no. Should maintain distance. Should remember that his world and hers couldn't mix without consequences. Instead, he heard himself say, "I'd like that. If it's okay with your mom." "Stay," Sarah said simply. "Please." That dinner, simple pasta and salad eaten around a small table in the apartment above the bakery, changed everything. Emma chattered about school and friends. Sarah told stories about the bakery's early days. And Dominic, for the first time in his adult life, talked about his mother, about the small kindnesses she'd shown people despite his father's violence. "She sounds wonderful," Sarah said softly. "She was. She taught me that strength and compassion aren't opposites. That real power comes from protecting people, not terrorizing them." Is that why you became the shield? Dominic looked at Emma, who was nodding off at the table, exhausted by the excitement of company. I became the shield because I watched my father die, and I realized his way: fear, violence without purpose, power for its own sake. That legacy died with him. I wanted something different. You wanted to be better than he was, Sarah said, understanding in her voice. I wanted to make sure other kids didn't have to watch their parents die in the street. Sarah reached across the table and placed her hand over his. It was a simple gesture, nothing romantic, just human connection. But Dominic felt it like electricity. You're a good man, Dominic Moretti. I don't care what anyone says about you. I know what kind of man shows up to save strangers. I know what kind of man keeps promises to little girls. That was the moment. The moment when Dominic Moretti, the shield, feared enforcer, respected boss, fell completely, irrevocably in love with Sarah Rodriguez. 3 months later the Kozlov situation escalated exactly as Dominic predicted. Viktor Kozlov, too proud to accept boundaries, pushed back. There were skirmishes, confrontations, moments when violence seemed inevitable. But Dominic had something Viktor didn't: the absolute loyalty of his territory. Businesses he'd protected came forward with information. Families he'd helped provided cover. The community closed ranks around the shield because he'd proven he deserved their trust. The final confrontation happened in a warehouse near the docks, neutral territory where both organizations agreed to meet. Dominic brought 12 men. Viktor brought 20. You've cost me business, Viktor said, his English heavily accented. You embarrassed my people. In my country, this means war. In America, Dominic replied calmly, this means you learned a lesson. My territory is off limits. Not because I'm unwilling to share Chicago. Because the people in my neighborhood deserve to live without fear. You want to expand? Fine. Go north. Go west. But South Side belongs to families trying to survive, and I won't let you bleed them dry. One bakery, Viktor sneered. You started war over one bakery? No. Dominic's voice was steel. I started war over the principle that women and children don't get terrorized by thugs too lazy to make honest livings. You want respect in this city? Earn it. Protect something instead of destroying it. For a long moment, the warehouse was silent except for the sound of Chicago traffic outside. Then, surprisingly, Viktor laughed. You're either very brave or very stupid, Moretti. I'm very committed. Dominic held the Russian's gaze. Walk away from South Side, and we have no problems. Keep pushing, and I'll dismantle your entire organization piece by piece. Those are your options. Viktor studied him, calculating odds, measuring resolve. Finally, he nodded. You have balls, shield. I respect that. South Side is yours. But this means you owe me a favor someday. No deals, Dominic said flatly. Just boundaries. You stay in your territory, I stay in mine. That's the only arrangement I'm offering. Another pause. Then Viktor extended his hand. Agreed. For now. Dominic shook it, knowing this was temporary peace, not permanent resolution. But temporary was enough. Enough to keep his people safe. Enough to let Sarah run her bakery without fear. Enough to build something that looked almost like a normal life. 6 months after the call, Emma's 7th birthday party filled Sarah's sweet angels with laughter and chaos. Children ran between tables while parents sipped coffee and pretended to supervise. Dominic stood near the back, trying to stay unobtrusive despite his size and reputation. You don't have to hide, you know, Sarah said, appearing beside him with a knowing smile. Everyone here knows you're the reason we're all safe. I'm not good with crowds. Especially kid crowds. You're wonderful with Emma. It was true. Over the past months, Dominic had become a fixture in Emma's life, helping with homework, teaching her to ride a bike, attending school events when Sarah's bakery schedule made it impossible. He'd never planned it. It had simply happened, as natural as breathing. "She's special," Dominic said quietly. "She loves you." Sarah's voice was soft but certain. "She talks about you constantly. Draws pictures of you. Tells her friends that the Shield is her family." The word, family, hit Dominic harder than any punch he'd ever taken. "Sarah, he stopped, unsure how to express what he felt. "I love you, too," Sarah said, her dark eyes meeting his. "I've been trying not to. Trying to be practical. Trying to remember that your world and mine are different. But Emma's right. You're our family. And I think maybe we're yours, too." Dominic's throat tightened. He'd faced down armed men without flinching, negotiated with killers without breaking a sweat, survived decades in a world where weakness meant death. But this moment, this woman offering him something he'd never believed he could have, nearly unmanned him completely. "I would die for you," he said simply. "Both of you. I know my life is complicated. I know I bring danger. But I swear to you, Sarah, I will spend every day earning the right to be part of your family." Sarah's smile was radiant. She took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "You already have that right, Dominic. You earned it the moment you answered a little girl's desperate phone call and kept your promise." Across the bakery, Emma caught sight of them holding hands. Her face lit up with pure joy. She ran toward them, crashing into Dominic's legs with her usual enthusiasm. "Does this mean you're going to be my dad?" she asked with the directness of children who hadn't learned to hide their hearts yet. Dominic crouched down to her level, bringing himself eye to eye with this tiny person who changed everything. "Would you like that?" "More than anything in the whole world," Emma said solemnly. "You're the bravest person I know. And you keep promises. And you make mommy smile. That's what good dads do." Out of the mouths of babes, Dominic thought, comes truth so pure it can heal even the most damaged hearts. "Then yes," he said softly. "If your mom says yes, then I would be honored to be your dad." Emma threw her arms around his neck, and this time, Dominic didn't hesitate. He held her close, this little girl who'd called him in her darkest moment and trusted him to save her world. Behind them, Sarah wiped tears from her eyes and whispered, "Yes. 1,000 times yes." Epilogue: 1 year later the wedding was small, just close friends and the families who'd become Dominic's chosen community. Emma served as flower girl, taking her duties with adorable seriousness. Marco, Dominic's second-in-command, stood as best man. And Sarah walked down the aisle of the small church wearing her mother's dress, looking like every beautiful thing Dominic had never believed he deserved. When the priest asked if anyone objected, Emma's small voice rang out, "I object to how long this is taking. I want cake." The congregation erupted in laughter. Dominic grinned. Sarah shook her head fondly. And the priest, smiling, moved quickly through the final vows. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Dominic pulled Sarah close, kissing her with the restrained passion of a man who'd found his home after decades of wandering. When they broke apart, Emma appeared between them, demanding group hug. The photographer captured the moment, 3 people from different circumstances, bound together by love and loyalty and one desperate phone call that had changed everything. That night, after Emma was tucked into bed in their new home, a restored Victorian house with a yard perfect for playing, Sarah and Dominic stood on the back porch, looking at stars over Chicago's skyline. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked. "Answering that call? Everything that came after." Dominic pulled her against his chest, his chin resting on top of her head. "Regret finding my family? Regret learning that I'm capable of love, not just duty. Never. Your men think I made you soft. Let them think that. Dominic's voice carried quiet amusement. They don't understand that love doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerous. Because now I have something worth protecting. Something worth fighting for with everything I have. And Emma has a father who'll teach her what real strength looks like. And I have a daughter who taught me what courage really means. Dominic's arms tightened around Sarah. She was 7 years old, terrified, and she still made that call. Still asked for help. Still trusted a stranger to keep his promise. That's bravery I'll spend my life living up to. Inside the house, Emma's voice called out sleepily. Daddy? Can you check for monsters? Dominic smiled, the same smile his men rarely saw but his family knew well. Duty calls. He found Emma sitting up in bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit. There's something in the closet. Dominic checked the closet with exaggerated thoroughness, even though he knew Emma's fear was really about processing security, about reassuring herself that bad men couldn't break in again. All clear, he announced. No monsters. No bad guys. Just your clothes and about 17 pairs of shoes you've outgrown. Emma giggled. You're silly, Daddy. And you're safe. Dominic tucked her back in, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Always safe. That's my promise to you. I know, Emma said sleepily. You keep promises. That's what dads do. As Dominic stood to leave, Emma's small voice stopped him. Daddy? I'm glad I called you that day. I'm glad you answered. Dominic's throat tightened with emotion. Me too, Piccola. Me too. The message here's what they don't tell you about being a man in this world: your strength isn't measured by how much you can destroy. It's measured by what you choose to protect. Dominic Moretti learned that lesson from a 7-year-old girl who called him in her darkest moment and trusted him to be better than his reputation. He learned that real power isn't about fear, it's about being someone people can count on when everything falls apart. Every man faces that moment. That call for help. That opportunity to be the shield someone desperately needs. The question isn't whether you're strong enough. The question is whether you'll answer. Because sometimes, the most important decision you'll ever make happens in the space between a ringing phone and the word, hello. Sometimes, one act of protection changes everything, not just for the people you save, but for yourself. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is open your heart. And sometimes, that's exactly what makes you unstoppable. Dominic Moretti answered the call. He kept his promise. And in doing so, he became something more powerful than any crime boss, any enforcer, any legend. He became a father. A husband. A man who chose love over fear. That's the kind of strength that builds legacies. That's the kind of power that changes the world. One promise kept. One family protected. One phone call answered. At exactly 12:57 p.m. on a Tuesday, everything changed. Because the Shield learned that the strongest walls aren't built from fear. They're built from love. And nothing in this world, is more dangerous than a man protecting his family.